Hey guys! So today, you and I are going to talk about temporary code. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, when should developers write code designed to be temporary? That is an excellent question. And I would say that it's probably when you have fully understood your craft and you know the difference between something that you think is temporary, or what some call MVP, and something that is truly temporary. Let me explain that a little bit, because I'm pretty sure it's starting to sound a little bit condescending here. So the first and foremost thing that I argue is that the reason why I said that thing earlier there about truly mastering your craft is that when you first start out, at the very least I was that way, when you start out, you are very much concerned with that the code that you write, usually at the very least, is good. You have performance anxieties, you have things like imposter syndrome, stuff of that nature. Now, my argument here is that is the insecurity of being new at something, and it doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, could imagine it's the same thing which I feel, for example, when I try to speak in a second language to someone who is a native speaker, and of course people who speak to me, and in this case Swedish, will feel the same sort of anxiety. They know that they're not so good at the language in question, perhaps, and they feel some performance anxiety towards me, right? Now, while you're in that phase, what usually happens is, at the very least for me, is that you focus much more on writing code that is, in the eyes of whoever is making the judgment, good. That is your primary concern, because you don't feel comfortable in your own abilities. You don't feel like you're going to be judged based on your code. And I mean, sure, some people are going to be judged by their code, and quite a lot of us will. I mean, I was judged by my code as well. I've had a few people on the channel even who's been like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, go and check his GitHub, or like, it's average at best, stuff like that, right? And the thing is, in the early days, that is a big deal to you. And so when you try to level up and become a proficient software developer, the first thing that you will notice is that you will become what I like to jokingly refer to as a bitter old senior. Now, a bitter old senior is someone who sort of has this idea that, well, I'm pretty good at what I do, and so forth and so forth. What they may or may not do, which is usually the case that happens, is that they will convince themselves that they know software so well that it doesn't really matter, because they've done this thing for so long now that, they can figure anything out. It doesn't matter what tool, and like they know the right libraries and the frameworks and everything like that. They've gone out of that phase now, being concerned with what other people think about their code. And now they're so used to just being allowed to do what they want and sort of doing this thing that it's just work right. Now, the dangerous part about that is when you get blindsided by the fact that even though you might feel that way, the real question is, are the results there? Because I've met many a software developer who has the idea of like they're seniors and they know what's good and what's not good and so forth. Yet, just the other day, I talked to a guy who apparently is considering himself to be fairly good. And I spoke to his teammates. He's supposed to be the tech lead. And I spoke to the team, I spoke to the product manager, and so forth and so forth. And apparently the others around him didn't feel the same way. And I was trying to showcase sort of that, there might be a few things that you could take a look at to sort of improve yourself and so forth. One very obvious thing would be that I asked him, can you please write down a story specification for the work that you want to do? And he couldn't. He could not, to save his life, he couldn't explain why he wanted to do, I think it was a refactor or something like that. He couldn't, just that basic communication thing, he couldn't explain what he was doing. He literally got to the point where he got angry with me, and he said to me, you should just trust me when I say that I need to do this. And I kind of go, I will trust you if you can show me what you intend to do. And this is where I argue the next level is going to be. And that is that when you have learned how to write software so well that you know when it's appropriate to sort of hack something together because it doesn't really matter, that is a big difference from doing that and just doing it by default, which is the case that usually happens, that you don't care about your craft anymore. To give you a super concrete example, guys, the most significant misunderstanding that I know of that happens in practically every software company I've ever worked with is when a quote-unquote senior level software developer is told to do an MVP. An MVP for the average person means that you're going to, well, at least if you talk to anybody that I've ever worked with, the average MVP person thinks that MVP means shitty system. And I've never seen that happen. I've never seen it not fail. And this is with the seniors of the senior guys. This is the people that are supposed to be the highest levels and so forth and so forth. Well, at the very least on paper, they're supposed to be seniors. And I've lost count at how many times, it's just a few days ago where I sat down with a team with 2 people who are in their 50s and been doing this for years and years and years and years. And I had to talk to them about, because basically their product manager had come to me to take a look to see what could be improved with the code base. And the first thing I see is that they have no structure in the code whatsoever. Like there is nothing. It's just a bunch of folders willy-nilly spread out. They don't even have a README explaining how to set the fucking thing up. And so I tell them that seems to be a reasonable thing to do, to structure the code base so that it can be done, so you can actually have new developers join the project, stuff like that and so forth. And they respond to me by saying that, oh yeah, but it was just supposed to be an MVP, this thing. Okay. But the project you have worked on this project for 4 years now. When does it stop being an MVP and become something you should probably take care of, like a serious project? That is a very big difference between understanding when you really do have temporary code and when you don't. MVP doesn't mean temporary code. Most of the people that I work with or that I've worked with and so forth have an issue understanding this, that MVP or temporary, or when people say they want just a quick solution and so forth, you have to understand what that looks like. I'll give you I have one that I'm actually working on right now. Very temporary solution. That's what I tell myself, of course, because of course if I'm going to sit here and talk about how I look at things, of course I have to be the person who knows how to do it correctly. Otherwise, why would you be listening to me, right? So what I argue is that when you are doing something as, for example, a temporary, like a shell script, or let's say that I did this a few times, you have a bunch of data in a bunch of various files or something like that, and you want to grab all that data and you want to put it into a format or something like that. It's literally something that this is a perfect, by the by guys, this is my personal favorite use case for AI is to do exactly this. So to give you my example, the thing I've worked on it this morning actually, I think I finished the last module. So at my current job, I have a lot of teams, and when I first started about a year ago, the first thing I do, which is, I've told you this before as well on my channel, I do the inventory. And as you can imagine, for 16, 17, I can't remember how many teams I have now, but basically the inventory for that amount of teams is literally, hey guys, can you all give me access to all your repositories because I need to check what stack you're on. And then I just go, because I don't automate things I didn't even know if I was ever going to do this more than once. And so I went through basics, just a language, frameworks, libraries, stuff like that. I put that in a table, a markdown table, because I love markdown. And then after I had done the full inventory, I was happy because now I knew exactly whatever was, or more or less what everybody was working on, or what they had at the high level at the very least, or what cloud providers and pipelines and stuff like that, right? Now the problem is that now, a year later, I'm getting questions that are more specific, where people are not just looking to me to have an opinion on like what tech stack you're using. Like you have a product manager actually coming and trying to understand, what does our testing situation look like? How do who is being productive, or and who's doing how are they doing in pull requests and stuff like that, and more ingrained stuff. And you and I both know that to know that stuff, you sort of have to work with the team for a while, which I haven't done. So what I do is that I use my coding knowledge to build a tiny little CLI. And that CLI, its only purpose is to very quickly grab report data that I want, that I know various questions that I have related to the development process. For example, how many files, by file extensions, does a Git repository have? So basically the whole thing is just every module in that thing. It could have been a shell script for all, it doesn't really matter what it is, right? The only thing it's going to do is that it's going to clone a bunch of repos, pull the latest versions of the default branches so that I have the most current version of main or master, depending on what they're on, right? And then it's going to grab stuff like, Git stats, what files are changing the most, how many times are different contributors making merge requests or pull requests and stuff like that, because it does some cloud stuff as well, or Azure, in this case it's Azure DevOps. And it basically just grabs all that metric data. And I've literally done that. Every module, every command in the CLI is literally asking ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, could you create, in this case it's C#, could you create a C# program that just goes through this repository and lists the contributors by commits, for example. That is throwaway code. I have not even considered best practices or anything like that, because I know that I might never use this code ever again. And it's so completely arbitrary. It's literally a console application. Each command is basically just one single program.cs file that I could ask ChatGPT to rewrite it in 100 different ways. It doesn't matter whatsoever, and nobody's ever going to maintain it, because as soon as I quit, that thing is never going to be touched again. It's just a personal productivity tool that I made. That is a temporary solution. That is the level of confidence you should have before you start thinking in terms of making shitty code, because as I've said to you guys before, it is really, really easy to convince yourself that something is temporary, and when you realize that actually it's not temporary, it's kind of hard to go back. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that I think about temporary code is when it is something that it's literally just something that you could delete it right now and recreate the thing in 5 seconds. That is temporary code. Something that has absolutely no longevity or anything like that. It's not something that is going to go into some type of production code or anything like that. If it is nothing like that, like a personal script or something like that, remember to always do the evaluation of an MVP. The correct way of doing MVP, if you ask me at the very least, is to understand that there are many ways of shipping something that you can call a version 1 of something. You can create, some people do the too big, they build a gigantic thing, and some people hack it together. And the whole point is to find that sweet spot where, as I like to say, remember what I say, guys, the goal of you writing software on behalf of a company and shipping that into production, your goal is not to be faster than you all the time, because you can always be faster, and the goal is not to it's literally hitting the mark just so, and making sure that every single time you ship something, you ship exactly the thing that will make your customer happy or whatever, so forth and so forth, with exactly the amount of security and considerations and testing and stuff like that, so that the code always works. That's the goal. The code should always work. Now, if you can do that, sometimes you're going to figure out that you can do the thing I was just saying. That code there doesn't require, I don't really care if it works flawlessly or not, if there's 100 bugs with it, because the output that I'm getting is there. I'm my own customer here, so I'm happy. It could have been written 100 times better. It's something that I would probably not show to someone in a job interview or something like that. But at the same time, I've gotten old and bitter and bald now, so I don't care if you like that code or not, because I know that this is garbage code that I just wrote in the spur of the moment to get something done. But on the other hand, had I known that this was something that's going to go into a project, and I'm going to have more people than myself working on it, I would still consider it as more it's like a personal checklist. It doesn't matter what I think this code is going to do in the future, or if it's worthwhile doing this or not. I always do the same evaluation. I make sure that if it is required to have some testing or quality, or I have other collaborators or something like that, I follow some basic principles. I don't overdo it, but I don't just do temporary stuff that nobody understands either. Have a great day.